Evans, and I'm delighted to be your worship leader this morning. One thing I love about this congregation is that we regularly share our weekly offering plate. I like learning about the good work that the Share Our Plate nonprofits do in the Boulder community, and I've actually been inspired to make additional donations and to volunteer. I want to extend a very warm welcome to everyone who's visiting us for the first time. Rather than gathering because we all have the same beliefs, we are an intentional community gathered around our shared promise to support each other and support each other's individual spiritual journeys. We're also intentional about bringing all ages together. In today's world, that doesn't happen very often. And we think it's important to have an adult friend ask a child or youth how they did on that science test they were worried about. Or a 30-year-old and a 70-year-old chat about life while having coffee after the service. If you're here in person, I hope you'll stay and chat after the service and tell us a little bit about you. If you're joining us online, fill out a visitor form in the link in the description. We would love to connect with you. Okay, there are 2 different events happening after the service today. In the Emerson room, we'll hold a new member class for anyone interested in learning about what it means to be a member and taking the next step toward official membership. And anyone interested is welcome. And this year, we are working to plan for the future of the building. After today's service at 12:30, please join us back here in the Sky Room for a Strategic Initiatives Committee presentation on their work in progress. They have the results of our property appraisal in and will present what the appraisal says about the value of UUCB's land and buildings. So come join Burton Lee and Robin Miller for a summary of the findings.
I always find there is a certain camaraderie and solidarity on the Sunday of daylight savings time. Welcome to you who have made it in person, and you who are joining online, and you who are watching the recording an hour from now. The words for our call to worship this morning are by the Reverend Gretchen Haley. Some of you know her. She was the intern here some years ago, the minister up at the congregation in Fort Collins. For this daylight savings morning, count up the hours, the minutes, the moments, call them all gifts. Then keep calling until the praise comes like breath, and all we have left is gratitude. Time is too quick to give away without noticing. We need an accounting of abundance, a space for celebration, that we have survived and keep surviving. That we are for more than ourselves, that we are in the struggle, and we get to sing. Bring your sleepy eyes and your weary heart. Bring your worried mind and your racing thoughts. But don't forget the joy, brought or borrowed, caught in your chest, or ready to tumble from every word that comes from your tongue, thirsty for beauty and life found in community, held in courage that is more than just your own. Come, let us worship together. Today is a question box sermon, which means that I'm going to answer on the spot without seeing them in advance any and all questions you have about the church, about Unitarian Universalism, theology, about me, whatever's on your mind. You should have gotten a card and a pen on your way in. If you didn't, will you raise your hand and the ushers will help you get a note card and a pen. Just put your question and your name on the card. I won't share your name, but I like to know who's who. Folks online, you can post a question in the chat, and when we get to it later in the service, I'll take a look there too. And folks in person, you'll bring your questions forward when we do our stones a little later in the service. In the spirit of questioning, let's open in song singing some questions. Will you rise in body or in spirit?
Comfort me. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery.
This month of March is our pledge drive month, when everyone makes a pledge of financial support for the year to come, which starts on July 1st. It's a particularly important drive this year because one of our key priorities is to increase pay for our staff team to keep up with inflation. No doubt you have experienced sticker shock in the grocery store over the last 6 months and more, and our staff team has too. Jennifer and Charmin, our pledge drive leaders, are asking everyone to consider a 10% increase in your pledge to try and keep up with the cost of living. The logistics of carrying out the pledge drive are substantial. We've got more than 160 people and families and folks pledging, and we need all of those in by the end of the month. And I am here not to guilt and shame you about what the dollar figure is. And I'm also not here to guilt and shame you about getting your card in by the end of the month, but I am here to nudge you about getting it in by the end of the month. So consider this a nudge. To carry this work out and to make sure all of the pledges come in by the end of the month, we have a team of pledge stewards who have been charged to be similarly gentle, respectful, hopeful nudges. And to follow up with folks who haven't made a pledge, I want to take this moment to recognize that group of folks serving as pledge stewards and making this drive possible. And if you're here, if you'll raise your hand and we'll recognize you all together, Allison Churnside and Caitlin Moore, John Cuddington, Janet Evans, Bob Evans, Diane Ewing, Sharon Ballou, Nancy Holt, Karina Denkenwolf, Janelle Freeston, and Nicole Ball. Will you join me in saying thanks to those folks? We are 1 week into the pledge drive, and about 20% of all of the pledges are in. So let me urge you to make it easier on that group of committed pledge stewards and get your pledge in today.
The chalice is the symbol of our liberal faith. It is the warmth of compassion, the fire of justice, a lamp on the spiritual path. If you're joining us online and have a chalice nearby, please get ready to light it with us. I'd like to invite Rachel Alba, our new Director of Religious Education, to light this morning's chalice.
Good morning. It's so nice that each week I'm like, oh, there's more faces I know the names of. So I'm Rachel again, and as I've met you all over the course of the past couple weeks, one question that has come up a few times is, how did you get to Boulder? Like, why did you move here? And so I decided that perhaps I might share a little bit about that in conjunction with lighting the chalice this morning. So I came to Boulder for the first time when I was a junior in college because my sister, who was living in New Orleans at the time, and my future brother-in-law, they were just dating at the time, was living in New York. And he's from here, and he suggested we all meet up to run the Boulder together. Which naturally, coming from various sea level locations, this went swimmingly. But, and all of us had planned to train, and none of us actually did, but we were all young enough that we could manage it. But the thing that was important about that trip was that I met a whole bunch of Ryan's friends. Ryan is my brother-in-law. And his friends all had these jobs that were completely different than what I'd ever thought of. And I was in that point in college where the direction you thought you were going was not the direction life wanted you to go anymore. And I felt like, oh, what am I doing? And so I met his friends, and one of them had just started an online journal for like spirituality and health, and it was really edgy and fringy, but he was not malnourished. Like, it was clear he was making enough money off of this. And someone else was putting up YouTube videos about him biking across the country and like eating bean burritos all the time. And he too was not malnourished and still making money off of this. And there was somebody else who was co-owning a chai company that was based in Boulder that still exists, and you can buy them in Whole Foods now, but then you couldn't. And so I was like, whoa, there's so many more options out here for what one can do with one's life than I thought, being from the DC area where everyone was a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher, worked in the military, or worked for the government. And so I was grappling with that question, and I ended up being like, I'm gonna just follow my sister and her then boyfriend to New York City after college. So I moved there and met even more people that had their own unique paths that were all where they had been, whatever it was that was calling them forth, that's what they were following. And so I started to develop that inner knowing of my own being to follow whatever it was that was calling me forward. And that led me to Boston, and I got my degree in theology there and had a great life. And then the pandemic happened, and the place I was working closed, and a bunch of my friends moved to the burbs that were like way further out than I cared to move to. And I was like, okay, so what do I do now? And my sister and her husband had moved back out to Boulder to be closer to his family. And I'm really close with them. They came to the 9 a.m. service with their two sweet kids, my nephews. And I was like, I think I might just follow them, because this place seemed like it was a good place to be before. So let me just try this. And there was something really beautiful about it too, because both when I met his friends, met my brother-in-law's friends in Boulder when I was a junior, and also my friend group in New York City, there was a sense of all of those individuals being able to be their full individual selves, yet coming together in community. And that's what I really wanted. And it was definitely something that I knew I could get from my brother-in-law's extended family and my sister and her kids. And I think in many ways, that's why we all come together in this community, because we all are individuals. We all have our own spiritual beliefs and our own unique paths to what guided us here. And we all want to be in community so that we can grow in wisdom together. And similarly, when we want to take action for things that really matter to us, we don't want to have to do that by ourselves. We want to do it in community so we can make a bigger impact. And finally, It's great to love just the people that live with us or the close friends we have, but it's even more rich to love in community. And so we come here today, and I light this chalice this morning in honor of the way that when we come here together as beautiful, vibrant individuals, we come in community so that we can be enriched even more than we could in our own individual places.
Thank you, Rachel. To covenant is to commit that even if we fall short of our aspirations, we will not let go of them. We will never cease from trying again to live them out. In that spirit, gathered in person and online, will you all together speak our covenant aloud? We gather in fellowship to speak truth to each other, to reach out and touch one another, to care with each other, and to seek the truth divine. So be it.
Join me in a spirit of prayer and meditation, a spirit of settling down, slowing down. Let's begin with a breath all together. And another slower letting yourself arrive in this place and time. Spirit of life and love, we are living in a wounded world, and we ourselves are wounded by it. We ask and hope and pray this morning to be the people we're called into becoming, to let the better angels of our nature shine through us into the world, that our words might match our wants and our actions match our aspiration. We ask and hope and pray this morning to turn aside from anger and from hate, even of those we call our enemies, to let go of delicious, rotten self-righteousness, that we stagger not with the uneven motions of the world, but go steady on our way, whatever the weather, clear mind, open, broken hearts, hands ready to serve. Be together in silence for 7 breaths. Disappointed and despairing and disconnected, that's us. Hurt by the insults of the world, hurt by addiction and mental illness, that's us. Hurt by violence and violence which has touched those we love, that's us. And that's not the whole story. No one of us is our worst day. No one of us is defined by when we fail to act. We're each of us held in a larger body called by many names. But we are love's people, working to make that real to each other. Amen. Ritual is an outward expression of an inward movement that sometimes unfolds over years. And in moving our bodies, in placing stones to symbolize our joys and our sorrows, we're like gardeners of our souls, of our hearts. We're tending and training and teaching ourselves to recognize the hope and the suffering woven into daily living. We're becoming a people. We're practicing, recognizing the beauty and the tragedy which suffuse this world. For you gathered in person, I invite you to come forward as you feel moved, silently to take a stone and feel its weight, feel your body slowly warm it. And let that stone be an emblem of your thankfulness or your worry, both. And then place it in the sacred earth in the company of all the joys and sorrows of this gathered community. And you can drop your question cards in the basket too, or the ushers will come to you if you don't come forward. This week we hold in love and respect Fred Cole, who has been named lead volunteer for informational services at General Assembly, our annual gathering in Pittsburgh this year. For all our hopes and all our griefs, we make this compassionate space.
What's that song singing in my soul? What's that song singing in my soul? What's that song singing in my soul? Keep on singing in my soul. Song of change singing in my soul. Song of change singing in my soul. Song of change singing in my soul. Keep on singing in my soul. What's that song singing in your soul? What's that song singing in your soul? What's that song singing in your soul? Keep on singing in your soul. Song of peace singing in my soul. Song of peace singing in my soul. Song of peace singing in my soul. Keep on singing in my soul. What's that song singing in the soul? What's that song singing in the soul? What's that song singing in the soul? Keep on singing in the soul. Song of love singing in the soul. Song of love
Some of my colleagues who do a service like this call it Stump the Preacher, which I will not call it because that is a very easy task. But here we go. I'm going to plunge in. I've got questions. I'm going to answer them as best I can. I had this experience at the 9 a.m. service that I would look at a question, I would think to myself, oh, that is such a good question, and I would have to restrain myself from posing it to the room. So I'm like, y'all have great ideas and experience. You are thoughtful and committed people. And I say that in part because I think and I hope this is part of an ongoing conversation, and one that you have with each other, with your friends, your family too. Not that you're showing up in this room looking for me to dispense the final word on every single subject, but to be part of the wrestling with you. So in that spirit, here's the first. How can you help me become more prophetic about my UU religion? How can you help me become more prophetic about, okay, who would like to answer this question? I think a couple of things. I think it matters as people of a liberal religious faith to counter the narrative in the public square that religious values mean conservative values. And so I think one way to speak to this is to say things like, to speak to your values and then say that, part of where these values come from, part of how I stay connected or committed to these values is my church community. I'm a Unitarian Universalist, and I think it can be that simple. The other way I think of answering that question is we're not a really evangelizing tradition. And in fact, I'm sure a whole bunch of people in this room right now got burned by evangelizing traditions at some point or another in your life. But I think of evangelism like this. 4 or 5 years ago, I had ramen for the first time. I don't mean the little microwave 70-cent packet. I mean real ramen. Who has had ramen? Yes. Good ramen? Yeah. And it is important to me to share with people who have never had ramen before, some of whom may be in this room, that it is so good. It is so good, especially on a cold day. This is a good ramen day. I think about the way we tell our friends pretty easily, and in a low-stakes, low-pressure sort of way, hey, I went to this new restaurant and it was really good. You're not grabbing them and shaking them and being like, you have to come to church, it's going to change your life. Just I went here, it's good, it made a difference for me. It changed the way the rest of my day or week was, hopefully for the better. I think that is evangelism too, or being prophetic about it. Do you ever get tired of preparing a brilliant sermon almost every week? I think the shape of this sermon has answered that question. That's very sweet of you. No. Almost every time I say I go to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder, people say, oh yeah, Unity Church on Folsom, right? What should I say next? Well, gosh, I think it's... I had a mentor I was reminded of this week who always liked to say, just say what's true. Right? And I think you just say what's true in that moment. Say, oh, no, actually, the Unitarian Universalist Church tucked back away in the neighborhood behind Eisenhower Elementary. And we've got some things in common with Unity, but mostly we're our own separate thing. And then either they will be interested or they will very much not. That's okay. Are traditional conservatives welcome at UUCB? Such an interesting question. I don't ever really know what traditional conservatives means. I think that sometimes Unitarian Universalism, and sometimes this church, gets associated with the church of the Democratic Party, which is not a thing I'm really interested in us being. But I also remember the church that I used to serve in Hyde Park in Chicago. Like, mainstream democratic politics were by far the farthest right wing of that congregation, which extended way off into radicalism. I say that just to say that different churches have different cultures, norms, and expectations. I think for us, what unites us is not a shared political platform. What unites us as a community is a shared set of values. And we may interpret and understand those values in different ways. We may derive them in different ways from different kinds of experiences. And we may translate those values into different kinds of political commitments and platforms. And I think there's space enough for that. And I don't think that this is a good home for folks who don't share those values. And that's okay. It's okay not to be a good home for that. There are plenty of other places. But when we say the inherent worth and dignity of all people, we don't mean the inherent worth and dignity of all people as long as you pass as cis and straight, right? And if that's what you mean, this is not a good place for that. And I don't assume that's what it means. I sort of think traditional conservatism, and I was raised in Massachusetts, so it may have looked different out there, it's like, everybody just mind your own business. That may not be how it's interpreted elsewhere. This is a wonderful question. It just says, why? In one of the very oldest collections of the Buddha's discourses, someone comes to the Buddha and they ask him a series of questions. And I won't get them exactly right off the top of my head, but they sort of boil down to why. Why is there something instead of nothing? Is the soul separate from the body or part of the body? Is the universe infinite or not infinite, right? And he answers those questions with like a brilliant sidestep. He says, essentially, I'm paraphrasing, he says, these are really interesting questions, and it may be fun and fascinating to talk about them, but they're not really relevant questions. He says, when a person gets shot with an arrow, you don't ask them, what was the height and hometown of the person who shot you? You get to work healing. That may have nothing to do with the question that was posed there. What's one thing you like about Colorado and UUCB? I like, one of the things that I really hoped in coming to this community, and it's just about 2 years ago now, that I was first talking with the search committee, was a community where, both for myself and for everyone else walking through the door, there were good, healthy boundaries, right, and self-presentation, but there wasn't a sense that you have to mask or conceal a part of yourself. And I think that's true both in the community that we want to create for each other, but it was important for me also in ministry. I didn't want to come to a community that, wanted me to be perfect, because I am, y'all pretty messed up too. I am also. And where we can all just come in the door and be that and say, all right. There's a line in a call to worship that I return to often that says, come into this place where you can be who you are and be who you are called to be. And that's what I want. And that's something I love about this community. And we don't do it perfectly, but we're all trying to do that. Something I like about Colorado, it feels cliche to say it, but 15 minutes from my house are the Rocky Mountains. They're right there. A more complete answer, though, is I find just so much energy restored and connection to the sacred being in the natural world. And I loved so many things about Chicago, but that was not one of them. We made a major effort many years to make UUCB a green sanctuary. If we move or build a new building, more on that topic after the service at 12:30, are we committed to it being a green sanctuary? So as part of the congregational visioning that we did in the fall, when 60-some people got together and said, here's what we think and imagine for the future of the building, it was notable, and we talked about that in that team, gathering responses, that people were not primarily saying, we want a green, energy efficient, environmentally responsible building. And we all sort of looked at each other as we're putting these responses together. And I think the conclusion we came to, certainly the way that I read those responses, is we just take it for granted that's how we're going to do it. I'm seeing some nods, so I think that's good validation. That in a way, it wasn't as if we need to make this the main focus or effort as we're talking about rebuilding or whatever it is, because it's sort of like, of course we're going to do it that way. I don't know concretely what that means, because it's still an abstract question, right? Do we stay or go? Do we rebuild? Do we expand? Do we stay in this building as it is, which is a very expensive proposition just by itself as our building systems age? What I feel confident, though, is that this is core to who we are and what our values are as a community. So we'll have to figure out exactly what that looks like as it goes, but I feel very confident saying yes to that. Man, what is this community's opinion of what is happening in Israel? Wow. It's such an interesting question. I mean, I actually haven't had any conversations about that with folks in the community, so I don't know. In brief, at least on my reading of it, Israel's involved right now in a series of judicial reforms that more closely align not just the current government, but sort of the way politics will work in that country with a more right-wing and fundamentalist strand of Judaism, because there are just as many kinds of Judaism as there are anything else in the world. To me, the piece that I go back to with something like that is the philosopher Karl Popper's paradox of tolerance. So Karl Popper, in the aftermath of World War II, in an increasingly pluralist society where we want to celebrate instead of squash differences, where fascism says everyone exactly the same, we want to encourage the diversity, Karl Popper says, well, yeah, the prerequisite for tolerance is not to tolerate intolerance. What is the most surprising emotion or feeling this community provides you? Wow. That's actually, y'all think of answers to that question for just a sec. What is the most surprising emotion or feeling? All right, keep thinking on that one. Why do very, very bad things happen to good people? Why do very, very bad things happen to good people? I think of the first noble truth that the Buddha teaches is suffering, the reality and fact of it. And whether it's him or someone else, there's this sense that if you are in the world and not suffering on some level, and of course the Buddhist analysis of what suffering is exceeds the time available to discuss in the moment. But if you are not suffering, then you are not in fact awake, you're dreaming. So I think of that response also as shaped by, I remember being a little kid and asking my mom about something, some bad thing that had happened to someone or another. And I remember this, and this is still deep inside me somewhere. she just sort of shake her head and say, it's what life in the world is, kid. And it. Man, that's a really good question I'm not going to go into. It's a really, really good question. Wow. All right, fine. Okay. As a person of European descent living on indigenous people's land, how do I reconcile the feeling of being an occupier with the reality of living here? Right? So I think about that question. Every year or two, I find myself, I end up preaching on complicity because I keep not having a really good answer or like analysis or understanding. I think this is a question not just about, living on stolen land. It's a question of what does it mean to be both the creators of and the beneficiaries of systemic injustice. That on the one hand, there is no one else, it's everyone, but there's no secret cabal who puts systemic injustice in place. It is daily created and sustained by all of us, and it grinds us down and crushes us, and we benefit from it. I say that especially as a white person. What do we do with that? I think sometimes the question gets posed, what do we do with that? As if there's like a solvable solution for it. And I don't know what that is yet. I'm part of a study group who gets together annually on a different topic, and this year the topic was apocalypse, and next year the topic is going to be reparations. So I'm excited to dig into that and try even conceptually to understand what are the different frameworks out there for asking this question and answering it. I think sometimes that it starts just by being aware. I think also the question here is not how do I reconcile the feeling of being an occupier? I think it's also how do I reconcile the guilt of being an occupier? How do I reconcile the fact that the house I live in was bought with the blood of the people who owned, who lived on, who had this land before me? What do I do with that? And I think on the one hand, it's a paradox to live into, not a problem to solve. I think it requires facing it. I feel like that's about as far as I've gotten so far. So let's keep working on it. All right. Got another hour or two. What inspired you to become a minister, to become a reverend at UU? So I grew up, neither of my folks were Unitarian Universalists, but when I was small, my older sister and I went to a UU church. We were in Lexington, Massachusetts, where the Unitarians are thick. We were one of 2 churches in the town of 30,000. That incidentally also informs my sense of why don't the local Unitarians all merge into one church? No, we'll be fine. You can put 2 or 3 others in Boulder, we'll be fine. But it was a process of, I think as a kid, it was lighting up to that sense of awe and mystery and wonder, of religious experience and reflection on it, of global responses to that. I went to college with no idea that ministry was even a job that people did in the world, right? And in my very first semester, I took a class on Islam and the Quran. I didn't know anything. I thought, I'm at college, I should learn some things. And in that first class session, it was like a falling in love with the study of religion, with these big questions. And it was a sense that, for me, this was a path I could follow my whole life, and I wouldn't run out of road before the end, and it wouldn't lead me astray. over the next couple of years, as I voraciously consumed all of the comparative religions classes I could, it became sort of frustratingly real that academia doesn't get to ask big questions of meaning. That's not the place where this conversation happens. And I didn't want to spend, 10 years of a PhD an inch wide and a mile deep. I wanted to invite the kinds of experiences that I had even as a little kid, of awe and wonder, of practice, of the complexity and reality of living in the world. And so it was sort of step by step and bit by bit. And as I had one experience after another, I did a summer as a hospital chaplain and said, oh, yeah, okay, this is good. I guest preached at all these little old Universalist churches all over Massachusetts, in Orange, and on and on. And it was this gradual thing. There's no road to Damascus moment. What is the UU perspective on talking to and receiving messages directly from a higher power? Why would God only give that privilege to certain individuals? We've got such a diversity of theologies and understandings of that. And for some folks in the house right now, probably that question is just like not a live question in their life. It's they don't have that experience or relationship with a higher power, and nothing's missing or broken by virtue of not having that. That's just not what the path is. But I think about the question slightly differently. I go back to the Transcendentalist movement in the 1830s, because I'm a huge history nerd, which so deeply shapes 19th century Unitarianism, to put at the center, one of the centers, direct experience of transcending mystery and wonder. It's still in our sources today. In the sense that right there in the center of religious life is your experience. It's not like my experience, which now needs to get filtered through me for you all to understand what religious life is really like. No, it's your personal, direct experience. And that is accessible to all people in all places at all times, and mediated through the path that you're following. This is why Buddhists tend to have visions of Buddha and not the Virgin Mary, and the reverse for Catholics, right? So it's mediated through that, but I think underneath that, to me, what's most important is the direct accessibility and experience. Okay, we'll do a couple more. I love this, but I do this all day. Gosh, what's good? Wow, these are intense. Well, is there anything theological you're grappling with right now you'd be willing to share? For me, complicity, that complicity piece is really complicated because there's not a way to step outside of the system, right? But also, what does guilt or shame or complicity even mean in that when it's not something that's chosen but experienced? Obviously, I'm grappling with it. Gosh, wow. Yeah, nope. Oh yeah, their commitment to Loop and its future with us in the fellowship. So in Longmont is the Longmont Unitarian Universalist Presence. It's a small group of UUs. It was founded within the last 10 years-ish, but not the last 6 years. So somewhere back there. Founded by a group of folks both from here and from the fellowship over in Lafayette, because a gigantic number of us, myself included, live in Longmont. They get together on Friday evenings to do a short service and then a dinner. There's all kinds of other great stuff that they do. And this winter, actually, the leaders of that group, as well as myself and Reverend Lydia from the fellowship, are getting together with our district person from the UUA to help have a conversation about what is the future of that group. I think that for some time, a question for that group in Longmont was, are we like an extracurricular activity for people who belong to this congregation or to the fellowship? Or are we our own thing for people who don't belong to either of those institutions? And pandemic and changes made answering that difficult, but I think it's leaning more towards the latter than the former. I think. And I'm excited, and I'm also just curious of what will come in that. Wow, is it, okay, last one. I'm gonna end with an easy one, right? Is it ethical or spiritually selfish to have children in this day and age? All right, by a show of hands. No. I mean, there's a I don't know. There's a million ways to be unethical and selfish, and a million ways not to be. And I feel like, well, yeah, you can. But as a category of action or being in the world, I don't think it is. I will say I am biased. I have 2 kids. Yeah, but that's a no. Okay. Whew, there are so many more questions not answered, and I hope in all of this, the work that I'm doing up here is not work that is reserved to me alone. This is all of our work. And the question, including big, more complicated than I just gave time for questions, like, is it ethical to have kids in this age? Like, that's not really, at the end of the day, for me to answer for all of you once and for all. That's for all of us to wrestle with individually and together, to discover together. One of the things that I love most about being here in this community and congregation is a sense of curiosity, that part of what we're here for is not because we've already got all the answers and we're just working out precisely what the ramifications are. We're here because we're in a curious community, working out those answers together, refining, comparing notes, and figuring out where we go next.
Please rise in body and spirit and sing Seed of Hope. And there's a seed of hope in my soul, a little seed of hope in my soul. Gonna tend it every day so that it grows strong. Oh, this I pray. Then that seed of hope soon will bloom in my soul. There's a seed of joy in my soul, a little seed of joy in my soul.
This month we share our plate with Mother House. Mother House helps those who identify as women, transgender, or non-binary, and their children, providing spaces of safety, respect, and kindness. They work to ignite the fire of confidence, and the belief in the dignity and worth of all human beings for all who walk through their doors. At Mother House, they don't shelter people, they strengthen them. Started in 1982, Mother House has provided at-risk mothers and their babies with a nurturing, supportive, and empowering residential community. Here are just a few statistics from a recent year. They housed 26 mothers, 12 babies, and 11 older children for a total of 3,981 nights of service. 100% of their residents received primary health care, ensuring improved labor and delivery outcomes, improved infant care, and regular well-check visits. 100% of their mothers received a tailored combination of services from therapists, addiction counselors, in-home nurses, doulas, and parenting support coaches. 90% of their mothers went on to permanent housing programs, long-term transitional housing programs, and or were reunited with their family. And finally, exit surveys show that 100% of mothers who entered the program, they were struggling with addiction, and they feel that their time at Mother House has greatly increased their chances of remaining in recovery. I invite you to give as generously as you are able. For those online, you can use the QR code or find a link in the video. For those gathered in person, you can scan the QR code or make a donation as the ushers now pass the baskets. May our gifts be used to enact justice, bringing peace and love to our Boulder community.
Thank you for your generosity. Our words for benediction are by the poet Rilke, who writes this: have patience with everything unresolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves. Love the questions themselves as if they were locked rooms or books written in a very foreign language. Don't search for the answers which could not be given to you now because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps then someday, far in the future, you will gradually, without even noticing it, live your way into an answer. Will you rise in body or in spirit? We'll close in song.
Take, may love love guide you